to David ben Ira, and Michael ben Sarah, and Adina bat Frecha. May Hashem heal them speedily. And refuah shelema leramach ivarehem ulshasa kidehem. Amen. Also, I would like to dedicate the lecture to the memory of Ziga Shlomo ben Azriel. Last week, we touched a little in the life of Sarah. Today we will go through from Sarah to Rivka and discuss some halachic matters. As we have decided, our program is to talk about Torah issues with halachic questions. In the Parashat Chaye Sarah, it begins with Vayiyu Chaye Sarah, and the life of Sarah was a number of years, 127 years. And then it tells us, of course our sages do add that the life of Sarah in two words, Shehakol hayu shavim letova, because the Torah specifically tells us the exact number of years that she lived in order to give us an insight into her life, that her life was impeccable. Shekulam shavim letova, that each one of her years were equal in greatness and goodness. You know, most people are creatures of instinct. Sometimes you feel good, so you are good. You feel bad, you become bad. You don't see that many times among people, that their character varies in accordance with the circumstances. If the situation is fine, he is in good mood. If he is in good mood, then he will do good things. If he's in bad mood, he might enter into some kind of rage and ruin his life. So people are fluctuating in accordance with their own personal circumstances. But who is the person to be praised in life? Is the person who does not fluctuate regardless of the situation. You know, God wants us one day to have it a nice and simple day. Sometimes a day might be rough, and everything has a reason, and everything is for the purpose to help us progress in life and establish a good personality, a good character. A good character will never be a good character. A character will never be good if it is stagnant in situations, if it remains the same. A good character is only good when in every kind of occasion, in every situation, remains good. Sometimes you lose the job. You come back home, the first thing you do is anger at home. But a great man, a good person is, even though he lost his job, he comes back with the same smile, the same serenity, and the same peaceful way and approach to his wife, number one, and then to his children. That's a good person. But a person is not good just because he has it all good, because there are days which cannot be all good. That's the way life is. To teach us, it has to be different. Each day differs from the other. And we progress if we maintain our stability in our character when it is good. When it is bad, of course, it is our duty to change our character. But when it is good, maintain it despite the various situations. Well, this is what our sages said about Sarah. What was so special about Sarah? That regardless of any situation, and believe me, don't you think that she had a rosy life. She had a lot of challenges in her life. Let alone the fact that she didn't have any children most of her life, till the end of her life. That's when she begot Yitzchak. But all these times, what do you think she did? Was she in bad mood? No. She prayed. So our sages said, why is it that the Torah is telling me with such a minute detail the exact numbers of her years? 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, to show me that they were all equal since her youngest age of 7. Her good character remained the same up throughout 100 years of her life, up and even during the 20 years of her life, when a person is much more virile and much more given to whims and adventures and desires and temptations. Sarah was a model of the Jewish people. It is definitely justified the fact that she is one of the great matriarchs of the Jewish people. Now she passed away. As we have mentioned last week, when Satan came to her and informed her of the death of her son Yitzchak, in the hands of his father, of course, which was not true, by the way, she immediately dropped dead. She couldn't bear the news. Of course, you could always say, if she had such a strong character, how come she failed at that minute? It's not a failure, it's just that her time has come now. And the life of our patriarchs and matriarchs were there only to serve us as a lesson how to guide our lives and to try to emulate them to the best of our ability. Here now we see Avraham coming, and as we have mentioned last week, his biggest test, which was even bigger than the test of bringing his son as a sacrifice, as he was told by God to slaughter his own son. Of course, it didn't come to be, because Hashem stopped him, and therefore, but still, he succeeded in that test, which in accordance to most of the opinions, that was the 10th test of Avraham. But there are some great opinions that say this was not the last. This was only the 9th test, and the real last test is when he went back home, finding his wife dead. Any person who would find such a thing would lose his marbles. Instead, he accepted with tranquility, with total acceptance. And then our sages said, the Torah says, Vayavo Avraham lispod lesara velivkota. And Avraham came for 2 things. Of course, he took care of the burial of his wife. As the Torah tells us, he went and he bought a parcel of land in which became, of course, Me'arat HaMachpelah, the famous place where even Adam HaRishon is buried, and where all the patriarchs and matriarchs will be buried except Rachel. So he bought that parcel of land for his wife Sarah, and now he is ready to give the eulogy and to cry for her. And as we have mentioned, it is a mystery, because crying usually is an instinctive response of the body. When you are immediately confronted by something tragic, you cry. But that's instinct. A person who is strong in character, as in total control of himself, will decide whether to cry or not. And lo and behold, the Torah tells us something extraordinarily mysterious. Vayavo Avraham lispod velivkot, to come and give the eulogy for Sarah, and then to cry. Usually people cry first, and then they have something to say. Here we see that first he said things about her, and then he cried. all to teach us one thing, that Avraham was a giant, a person who is in total control of himself. He knows that he is under two obligations. One obligation is to give the eulogy, and one obligation is to cry. To cry is for a good man is an obligation. Our sages said, "Kol hamazil dim'a al adam kasher zoche lechayei olam haba." If a person has tears over a person who is kosher, over the death of a person who is kosher, who is a tzaddik, a saintly person, then he will deserve his share in the world to come. So of course his wife was a tzaddiket, was a righteous woman, and he was under the obligation to cry, but he did not want to give in to his instinct. There is crying and there is crying. There is a philosophical crying and there is an instinctive crying. Avraham is not the person who will by instinct cry, but rather by pure philosophy, to cry for a person. Why? The separation, of course, as well as the loss of the world, that the world lost Sarah. A woman like Sarah is not easy to find. Why do we have to give the eulogy for a person who is dead? And this is the first halachic issue of tonight. What is the purpose of the eulogy? I have many funerals, and I don't even know them, and yet I give the eulogy. After I sit down with the family, they tell me several informations about the deceased, and then I get up and I speak good things about him, even though I never knew him, but based on the information that was released by the family to me, I stood in front of a whole congregation and spoke about this individual who passed away, a man or a woman. Why is it necessary? And by the way, this question in a way was posed in the Talmud in Masechet Sanhedrin on page Memvav 46, where it says the following: Iba'ya leho. There was a question posed in the house of study. Hespeda yikra de Chaye or yikra de Shachve? Is the eulogy a matter of honor for the living or for the deceased? Is it just a matter of honor? Because it's always possible to say, who cares about the dead? The dead man is dead, and perhaps he doesn't hear anything, which is not true, by the way. But perhaps he's just there, and therefore what is there the point of honoring him with words? So there is a big dispute in the Talmud, a machloket. Some say it's rather the honor of the family. When you talk good things about a person who has passed away, it's an honor, it's respectable towards the family. And some say it's rather for the dead person himself. So the halakha goes in accordance with the opinion that says that the eulogy, although it is a mitzvah to say eulogy as a matter of honor for the family, but it is primarily for the dead. What do we get from this? That it is useful, it is beneficial for the dead to hear good words about him. Which means to get up and say, this man was a good man. He was an honest person. This is beneficial for the dead. That's what the Talmud arrived to this conclusion. And we find also in the Midrash Rabbah, in the book of Kohelet, on chapter 12, we find that there is a Midrash that tells us, בשעה שהאדם נפטר מן העולם, הקדוש ברוך הוא אומר למלאכי השרת, ראו מה הבריות אומרות עליו, כאשר היה, ירא שמיים היה, פלוני זה, מיד מיתתו פורחת באוויר. The Midrash apparently does tell us a very clear answer to the quest that we had before. And it says the following: when a person is deceased from this world, then immediately Hashem Almighty turns to the ministering angels and he asks them, can you go and find out, so to speak, of course, it's a philosophy, can you go and ask what is it that the people are saying about this man who just passed away? Do they say that he was a kosher man? Do they say that he was a God-fearing person? If yes, then immediately the casket, the mittah, the bed upon which the dead man is laying, will practically rise in the air, spiritually talking. Of course, we cannot see such a thing, but apparently in spiritual world there is another dimension in which you see that the casket of the dead is elevated. But that is only if the words that were said by the people is the fact that the man was a good man. So what do we see now from this midrash? We understand very clearly that words of eulogy, of praises for the dead, are beneficial to the dead. They are a matter of honor for the dead himself, because as you could see, that even in heaven, they follow the decision of people. That's amazing. And we find in the book, a very ancient book, written by Rabbi Yehudai Chassid in his classic, known by the name Sefer Chasidim, in chapter 224, where it says, Ha'elyonim maskimim leda'at ha'tachtonim, which means the upper ones agree to whatever was decided by the lower ones. The lower ones are us. So we learn from this that if we say, it doesn't matter, of course, I added here that it should be at least somehow the truth. If you know that the guy was a rotten person and you come and say this man was a saint, of course everybody is going to know that it is a lie. So it's perhaps in cases like this, it's better to keep the tone of your voice down. But when a person was a good man, and people, when you ask them, how was he? You say, he was a nice person, he was an honest person, he was this and that. That in that case, even if there is something that people did not see, and it's only personal to the guy himself, and in heaven they know everything, they know the inside of a person, but nevertheless they will not mind whatever is secret with the life of this man, and they will go rather according to the open rendition and testimony of the people. Don't you think it's a great chidush to know? It's very good to know. Which means, if a person is more or less known as a good man, and we say that he is a good man in heaven, even though they know that perhaps he was not that good inside, but they will write down that he was good. And all this is based upon a halachic sentence that is brought in the Talmud, En lo ladayan ela ma she'enav ro'ot. The judge himself cannot base his decisions upon what he feels, but only upon what he sees. So therefore, if we see that the person was a good person, in heaven, who are expert, of course, in the internal situation of a person, they still will not mind and will agree with whatever we decide here. And that's the reason why we give the eulogies for people. And that's why every person, no matter how he was, but usually every rabbi is of course, he gets up on the podium and he says good things. Of course, the sages said not to exaggerate, never to exaggerate, because there is a limit to what we said. But there is somehow, the world agrees he was a good man, was a nice man, then in heaven they will write him to be a good man, and therefore he will deserve many things. So now we understand definitely that the hesped, the eulogy, is a matter of kindness towards the dead. זה ממש גמילות חסדים שעושים למת. The eulogy is a kind of loving kindness that we do towards the dead. And that's exactly what Rashi in Masechet Sukkah on page 49, as well as Rabbeinu Yonah, both of them are in the same, with the same agreement in this matter. Any question about this? Now, we finished with Sarah. We will go later on to Rivka, but first let us discuss another issue that is brought in the parasha of Chaye Sarah, which concerns us. Now Avraham is old. After the death of his wife, of course, he was already quite old. He was 185. And the Torah says in that parasha, Avraham Zaken, that's a famous pasuk, Baba Yamim Hashem berach et Avraham bakol. And Avraham became old, and Hashem blessed Avraham with everything. So the simple meaning is that he was blessed with every single good thing that there is in life. He was a rich man, no question about it. Children, he had children now. With Yitzchak, even more, better. But he had Ishmael before, and other children. He was a very smart man, very learned, brilliant. He had all the respect of the world. I mean, Avraham was the practical greatest success that anybody could ever have. But our sages come and discuss the word bakol. Hashem berachet Avraham bakol, and Hashem blessed him in everything. Bakol means in everything. But our sages insist on a certain information. Bat hayta leAvraham uvakol shma. Before I explain, I have to ask a question. If we said that he was blessed with everything, and we have no knowledge of any daughter that was born to Avraham, that means he was missing something. To have a daughter is a great joy. You don't think so? How would the world exist without girls? He had a son. He was overjoyed with his son, no question about it. But daughter, not only that, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of procreation, you have to have a minimum of one boy and one girl. And it doesn't say anywhere that he had a daughter. So how is it that the Torah informs us that Hashem blessed Avraham with everything? He was missing the joy of a girl, of a daughter. You don't think it's a good question? And therefore our sages said, Bat hayta lo leAvraham ubakol shma. That Avraham indeed had a daughter. And her name was Bakol. I think in the Bukharian family there is such a thing as Bakola.
Bakula.
Bakula. A name like that. Probably it stems from the word Bakol. Just by the way. There is no such a thing?
I've never heard.
I heard this name. Bakula. Bakula. Is it Persian maybe?
Mabula means grandmother.
Not Mabula. I mean Bakol. Anyway, our sages sometimes are very strange in their interpretations. And we have to understand that they are very deep. They said he did have a daughter. Only, he did have a daughter from whoever, either from Sarah, which the Torah does not mention at all anything, or from any other wife that he had. He had several wives. He had Hagar, who gave him Ishmael, maybe from her. Or maybe Keturah. There was another name of another woman in the life of Avraham. Her name is Keturah. The only thing is that our sages always, as usual, spoil the fun. And they say that Keturah is Sarah, in fact. Alright, it doesn't matter. The point is that our sages say that Bat hayta leAvraham ubakol shma. He had a daughter and her name was Bakol. Well, and you'll be surprised that the sages are very serious about it. But that's not the pshat. That's not the simple meaning. Whether he had a daughter or not, we assume that he had, because otherwise the Torah would not say that Hashem blessed him with everything, because everybody needs also the joy of a daughter. But there is another interpretation of Bakol. When is it possible for a person to be blessed by everything? Can you say when he is young? Okay, sometimes you could say when a person is young, he has koach, he has energy, he can run, he can do many things. But can we say that Hashem blessed him with everything? He doesn't have enough experience, right? You know, the joy of life is only together with the experiences that you have in life. When you withstand all kinds of challenges in life, that's the real joy. A young man still has to learn plenty, my friends. You know that? But especially if he's not married yet, then he doesn't know the joy of a marriage. Or perhaps he didn't have yet children. He doesn't have the joy of the children yet. And so forth and so forth. Perhaps even if he has everything, but he still doesn't have enough money. When do you have everything? For a person who is really successful, upon whom we could say what was said about Avraham, Hashem berach et Avraham bakol. He gave him everything. So we might just say, with the first aperçu, that a man like Avraham, at the end of his life, finally he had everything. Right? This is what we would say. He has riches. He had a beloved wife. He had peace at home. He had children. He had respect. He had a long life. He had health. He had everything. So for us, it's not a big problem. But again, our sages are going to tell us something else. Because if it is based on our common interpretation, I'm going to have to spoil everything that I said about an old man. An old man could be rich, could be everything, healthy. He is, let's say, 90 years old. But there is always something missing. Maybe he has everything, but now he's very forgetful. Maybe he has Alzheimer. Maybe he has fears. Right? He's close to death. So how can we call this a blessing with everything? There's always something missing to everyone. Now we thought that an old man who has been successful all his life, that's a blessing of everything, but still there is something missing because there is death that is lurking. He doesn't know when, maybe tomorrow, maybe after.
What kind of death?
And especially if he's very rich. If he has billions of dollars, pity him, the poor guy. Because he knows that all these billions he's going to relinquish very soon. Don't you don't feel pity for the supreme rich sometimes? I do. It's good to be a millionaire, but to be a billionaire is a big, big problem. I don't know, you want to be a billionaire? I don't know. I prefer to be a millionaire, that's enough.
Good choice.
Because a billionaire, it means you are going to leave everything to somebody else. Which is okay. I mean, but what about if it didn't turn out to be the way you want, and then, whether you like it or not, everything goes in the hands of those that you didn't want him to have.
Leave it for your children.
Okay, that's good. If one succeeds to leave it to his children.
Your children pass it down to their children.
It is true, everything is good, but I'm talking about the personal feeling of a person. We cannot deny the fact that a person is egotistical by nature. And even though he knows it's going to go to the hands of his children, but nevertheless, it is always a source of tremendous sadness that so much riches is not his. You know, our sages said something. En lo la'adam ela ma shemotzi bechayav. Our sages said, and I want you to remember this statement. You know what you really have? What we can call your possession? What we can call your possession is only what you succeed to spend in your life. That's yours. And that's the common explanation by the secular understanding. Because according to religious understanding, what is yours is only what you gave as a charity. That's yours. But forget about that. Common understanding. When a person, when you know that he's going to leave behind everything else, the fact that he didn't spend so much. Didn't I tell you the story of Rockefeller one day? Rockefeller, when he passed away, there was a very big dispute among two rabbis. One says he had only $6 million. The other one said he had $600 million. And both of them said, are you crazy? The difference is extraordinary. How can we differ in such a thing? And the answer is that the guy who said 6 million, he explained his case. He said, that's all. Go and check how much he spent in his life. And you'll find out that he had only he spent only $6 million. What he left behind is not his. So there is always this anxiety, as hidden as can be, and as much as pride hides it. Even for a person who is very old, he does have this anxiety that so much money he left behind, and now others are going to dispose of it. And please don't tell me children, not children. There is always that anxiety. Maybe the guy is a saint, so he doesn't care. Okay, but there is always that anxiety to a certain degree for a person, and he sighs when he says that so much he's going to leave behind. Our sages said in the Gemara something mesmerizing. They said that Resh Lakish, the famed, brilliant mind, who was the colleague and disciple of Rabbi Yochanan, one of the greatest Talmudists that we have in the Talmud. He was a very, very poor man. When he was about a few hours before he died, he was on his deathbed. He was very poor. But then he opened his eyes and he saw that there was still hanging a bunch of garlic. And he sighed. He released a big sigh. So a disciple there said, Rabbeinu, what happened? Why? What's the matter? He says, وَعَزَّبُوا لَآخَرِيمْ خَلَامْ. Why should I leave this behind me? Somebody else. So it's only it's only garlic. And yet, I mean, why not? I mean, it's mine, and now it's not mine really, because it's somebody else is going to have it. So how can we say, and remember what I told you many times, whatever the Torah says is to the utmost perfection. If the Torah says that God blessed Avraham with everything, then even if you keep on accumulating all the good things that he had, you still will be stuck with the last few minutes when you know he's going to leave behind everything. So again, it's not perfect what the Torah says, and it is impossible, because what the Torah says is 100% perfect. Like our sages said, if you don't find it perfect, it's only because you are not perfect. Imrekhu. What I mean by saying you, I mean me too. Don't get the idea that chas v'shalom I don't understand that. I do understand. Imrekhu mikem. If you find something empty in the Torah, it's not because the Torah is empty, it's because you are empty. That's all. Although the Torah has everything there, only you have to find it. So now our sages said, you know who is the old man who has been successful all his life and who has everything? Is probably will be disappointed. A Torah scholar, a man who lived a life of Torah and who has great knowledge of the Torah. A man who has a great knowledge of the Torah when he is very old. In most cases, an old man is usually finished. Not a great Torah scholar. A great Torah scholar, he can be 100 years old, and yet people will go and surround him with their quests and everything, and his mind is sparkling, in most cases, of course. You know, our sages said that זקני עמי הארץ כל זמן שהם מזקינים דעתם מתטרפת עליהם, זקני תלמידי חכמים כל זמן שמזקינים דעתם מתיישבת עליהם. The difference between an old man who hasn't learned anything and an old man who has learned everything is the one who didn't learn Torah at his old age, he will be a simple person. In fact, his mind will be minimized and reduced gradually. Whereas the person who has learned all his life Torah, the older he gets, the more established he becomes in his mind. So now, an old man. Let me quote from the Talmud in Masechet Kiddushin on page 82. Pebet. Rabbi Nehorai Omer. It's good now to learn a little piece of Talmud. There was a great rabbi by the name Rabbi Nehorai. We shall see later what's this Nehorai. Anybody here is called Nehorai? Nobody. I don't know if anybody in the world is known by the name Nehorai. Nehorai sounds Aramaic. To what? We'll see later. Anyway, Rabbi Nehorai said, מניח אני כל אומנות שבעולם ואינני מלמד את בני אלא תורה. Don't jump on me yet. Let me first explain. Rabbi Nehorai says, I am leaving behind every kind of profession in the world, and I will teach my son only Torah. Of course, I could make him become a doctor. I could make him become an engineer, a businessman, whatever. But I prefer to make him become a Torah man. Why is that, he said? He says, because when you learn Torah, here is what happens. Number one, when you are young and full of Torah, meshamerato mikol ra' bena'ruto, which means the Torah protects him. How does it protect him? Here is a young man. A man who learns Torah, who can take any Gemara and learn it and goes through it. This man, the Torah is going to protect him from what? From all the evils of the world. A young man today, for example. A young man today who is not in the world of Torah, how much can you rely on his... he wants to go and enjoy himself in everything. So he does not protect himself so much. He might just end up in something that is not so good, such as drugs or other things. I mean, there are so many dangers lurking at the youth today that this Gemara becomes very evident. All you have to do is open your eyes and see what's going on in the world. A young man today, if he is not a man of Torah, he is in danger of succumbing to all the temptations that lurk at him, and among them, some of them that are quite dangerous. Being young, he is not very careful, and then he succumbs and falls into the hands of all kinds of bad things. But if you are a man of Torah, meshamerato mikol ra', Torah protects him from evil. Did you ever see a young Torah scholar who comes out from a nightclub where they take drugs and who knows what else? Did you ever see a young Torah scholar, a brilliant Torah scholar, coming directly from the yeshiva of Mir, for example, and goes into a cabaret? Or who knows where? There's no such a thing. He knows he's protected by the Torah. Of course, we understand why he is protected, because he has the Torah that is a fence for him, and he does not allow himself to go for things that are beneath his dignity. You understand? If a person goes to areas in which it's still with his dignity, it's not bad. The problem and the danger remains only when a person loses his dignity and he goes to things that are low. And, Satan created a lot of temptation and a lot of desire even for things that are quite low, very low. Sometimes, in order to satisfy his desires, a person could practically fall even below the level of an animal. Do I have to explain any further? Everybody knows that. But a man of Torah, even when he is young, he is well protected. What about when he becomes old? The Talmud says, Rabbi Nehorai says, "Venotenet lo acharit vetikva beziknuto." Most people, when they are old, it's like they gave up on life. Many people are sad when they are old. They're not anymore. They know the end is close, or they are not very a source of attraction for many people. They have to stay, but many old people remain by themselves in total solitude, which is not good, because the bracha of a Jew is only when he has an old Abba with him. Where are those days in which the Abba, the father, the old father and the old mother stayed at home with their children, surrounded with love, surrounded with honors? Thank God we still have today. The Bukharian families, they have this, Baruch Hashem, and all the Sephardic, Baruch Hashem. But unfortunately, modern times have brought with them days in which you see that even among the best, you see that they send immediately when the parents get older, they send them to an old age home. I'm not saying that it's bad, it's not bad, but usually, what is the idea? The idea is that every father and mother, they like to remain with their honor. And when they feel that they are not wanted very much, they prefer to go to an old age home. Even though there are exceptions in every case. I'm not saying no. So every old man, when he comes to the age of quite old, such 85, 95, he loses a lot of his equanimity. He loses a lot of his honor. But if he is a Torah man, a man who has learned over 65 or 70 years of Torah, this man is a great sage. This man is an attraction. As old as he is, everybody surrounds him. Everybody wants him. Everybody wants to get close to him. Everybody comes to him for a bracha. So that's what it says. Notenet lo acharit vetikva beziknuto. An old man like this who has such great load of Torah in his mind, this man, the Torah has given him hope for the last days and hope even in the afterlife. And therefore, Rabbi Nehorai said, why would I give my son? By the way, I'm not suggesting to do what Rabbi Nehorai says, because I'm going to show you immediately that there is the counterpart by Rabbi Ishmael, who says it's good always to learn Torah and to have also a profession. No question about it. But that's an old dispute. First, we like to see what is the philosophy of Rabbi Nehorai. He says, I don't want to jeopardize the future of my son by giving him professions. I'm going to teach him Torah. All right. And where do we see this? Where do we learn this, that when you are blessed with Torah, even in your old age, you are blessed with everything? We come back to the pasuk of Avraham. That's why the Torah says, Ve'avraham zaken, baba yamim, and Avraham became very old, and Vashem berach et Avraham bakol, and God blessed him with everything. In which way? Riches? He's going to die. That's not what the Torah means. What? Hercules? He's not Hercules, he's an old man. So in which way we see this blessing? The blessing is the knowledge. The knowledge of Torah that Avraham had gave such inspiration to everyone surrounding him that in his old age he was known as the most successful man that there is, upon whom we cannot say that there is anything negative about his old age. Whereas can we say the same thing about anyone else? Everybody knows that old age is already negative, But for Avraham, because he carries with him a load of Torah, even the last day is a great day of success. If you agree with me or not, anyway, that's the expose of the Gemara, the Talmud. There's only one question regarding this. We find in the Gemara in Masechet Eruvin, in another volume, on page 13, where it says that Rabbi Nehorai, that guy that we mentioned before, who is he? That's Rabbi Meir. Only his name sometimes changed. Like Reuven, you said Berichai. Hey, Reuven. Rabbi Chai. So Reuven, Rabbi Chai. Rabbi Meir, once he was Rabbi Meir, once he was Nehorai. In fact, if you know the Aramaic vernacular, you will see that Nehorai is exactly the interpretation of Meir. Meir means illuminates, reverberates with light, right? And Nehorai comes from the word Nehora in Aramaic, which means light. Like you know about the word Saginehor. Saginehor is the Aramaic word for a blind person. The Talmud never calls a blind person blind. She calls him a Saginehor, who has great light. And we know it's exactly the opposite. Anyway, that's called the language of Saginehor. That's another something else to discuss some other time. But now we see that Rabbi Nehorai is Rabbi Meir. And by the way, why was he named Rabbi Meir? Meir means
to light.
The one who enlightens. So we find in the Talmud that his name was in fact Nehorai. That's the natural name, but he was called also Meir because he מפני שהאיר עיני ישראל בהלכה. Because Rabbi Meir was such a great and brilliant mind that he illuminated the eyes of the Jewish people with his knowledge of Jewish law. That's why he is known as Meir. So what am I aiming at now? There is one problem. In that Gemara which I mentioned before on Masechet Kiddushin on page 82, there is an opinion of Rabbi Meir. We learned Rabbi Nehorai says something, that he wants to teach his son only Torah, right? But Rabbi Meir came and he said, no, לעולם ילמד אדם בנו אומנות נקייה וקלה. Always people should always teach their children a profession that is easy and clean. Which means he is for learning a profession, right? To be a doctor, to be a builder, whatever. I mean, all the sages in the Talmud, they did have a profession. You know, Hillel and Shammai. Shammai was a builder. Everybody knows that he always walked from the yeshiva where he gave his lecture. He walked with his stick with which he took measurements. A builder. Dechafo be'abmat binyan. That's a Gemara in Masechet Shabbat. So now we see that there is a big contradiction between Rabbi Nehorai and Rabbi Meir. And we just found out that Rabbi Nehorai is Rabbi Meir. And yet we find two different opinions by the same guy, only with different names. Do you follow? You did ask for raising a level, right? So you follow? So you have to be attentive. Here we have Rabbi Nehorai and Rabbi Meir, both of them the same person, and yet with two different opinions. When Rabbi Meir says, teach your son a profession, whereas Rabbi Nehorai says, I will teach my son only Torah. So apparently it is a big contradiction. Right? So how do we understand? The truth is, it's very easy to understand. It's not a dispute. It's not a difference of opinions. Only Rabbi Meir, he is a practical person. He says most people, they cannot really survive on learning only Torah. The world needs people who work. Only he suggested the following. He suggested it's good to learn Torah and have a profession. That's Rabbi Meir. Only when it came to his own son, he says, however, for my son, I have permission to choose for him only Torah. Now we have an almost distorted view of what we thought was easy to understand. Here, Rabbi Meir is telling us something. Yes, it is advisable to always send your children to schools to be professionals. Just make sure that they also learn in yeshiva, to have some Torah knowledge. But he says, for my son, only Torah. That's all I want. So it's not anymore a dispute. It's not a difference of opinions. It's just to tell me that both of them, listen, the rule is that you have to teach a profession, because that's otherwise how will he survive? But I have the permission to choose for my son something else. I'll take care of my son. It's my business. And I want him to be only Torah. Why? Because Torah will protect him when he is young and when he is old. That's the difference. Listen, between you and me. An old man who is famous for his Torah scholars, Torah knowledge. Do you think he is left aside like nobody? And what about his face? This is Lubavitcher Rebbe, right? What about the great tzaddikim? You know, there is a rabbi in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Eliashiv, very famous for his decisions in Halakha. He is 102 years old. And the whole world, all they wait is one word from him. You know, if you succeed just to hold his hand, so much crowd there is around him. If you just succeed to hold his hand, you think that you won the lottery. He was the sandak of my grandson, by the way. Rabbi Eliashiv, he's the posek of the generation, known, very known, in Yerushalayim. Never heard of Rabbi Eliashiv? Rabbi Eliashiv. כל אחד יודע מי זה רבי אלישיב. Anyway, he has books and everything. So you see, here's an old man, 100 years old. And believe me, that's not old age as we see it by everyone who is old. What kept him like this? Only one answer, the Torah. So now we have two views, both of them optional. It is advisable to teach your children a profession so that they will make a living. Just make sure, don't let them be empty of Torah. What a pity when a child grows to be a great doctor but he doesn't know anything in Torah. The Jew is not supposed to be this way. The Jew is supposed to have both. God, Baruch Hashem, endowed the Jew with a mind that can have both. You know that? I'm not saying that he has to be a Gaon in Torah. You cannot be a Gaon on Torah if you have other things besides Torah. But have also a mind of Torah. You know, I just attended, about a month ago, before I left to Israel, we attended the dinner of Yeshiva, of Mir Yeshiva. There were 1,000 people, all of them Torah scholars. And at least 75% of them are people who go to work every day. This one in the bank, this one is for his business, this one sells mattresses, this one, all kinds of professions. But all of them, they work during the day, they come back in the night directly to the yeshiva. They go to eat something and then they go to yeshiva. Their life is a life of joy. And the wife is also very happy because she knows when she's, where is your husband? My husband is in the yeshiva. He'll be back at 11. Of course, if she protests, then it's a problem. Then he has to listen to whatever she says. If she says, I want you to be here by 10, then he has to accommodate her. But again, a real Eshet Chayil will be angry at him if he comes before 11. She will tell him already, but then today it's very dangerous because he might think that she doesn't love him. You know. Basically, this was in ancient time a dispute between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Shimon. It was Rabbi Ishmael who said, Hanheg bahem minhag derech eretz. It's good to learn Torah together with a profession. But Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, the famed Kabbalist, the man who gave us the Zohar HaKadosh, is the one who said, oh yeah? What are you talking about? You go to plow your field, you have to plow the land, you have to harvest. When are you going to have the time to learn Torah? No way. Learn Torah and rely on God. Now listen to this. This is brought in Masechet Brachot. This is a known issue. A very fundamental issue between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Ishmael says both Torah and Derech Eretz, which means also a profession. Make a living. But Rabbi Shimon says, no, learn Torah. Where are you? How can you make a living? Don't worry, God will provide. And the Talmud says, Elu she'alchu achare Rabbi Ishmael alta biyadam. Elu she'alchu achare Rabbi Shimon lo alta biyadam. Those who followed the opinion of Rabbi Ishmael, Torah and profession, succeeded. Those who followed Rabbi Shimon, only Torah, did not succeed. So what am I saying here? Contradicting myself. Rachmin, save me. I am contradicting myself again. So what have I decided? Only Torah or together? What's going on? And the Talmud tells us those who followed Rabbi Shimon did not, lo alta biyadam, did not succeed. The Mefarshim explain, the classic commentators explain that the truth is, of course, the Rabbi Shimon is correct. Only most people, the total majority of the world, even if they have a desire to do what Rabbi Shimon says, they will always wait for, oh yeah, I'm going to take up the opinion of Rabbi Shimon, and then wait, maybe I'll see if food will fall from heaven. So they'll be always in expectation. Those who are in expectation of something that is supernatural will never succeed. Therefore, you really want to succeed, close your eyes and go ahead and do it, and then we'll see. But that, so few people can do that the Talmud calls it lo alta biyadam, did not succeed. Because those people were in total expectation of to see, oh yeah, I'm going to join the clan of Rabbi Shimon and we'll see if God will help me. That's not how God helps. God helps you only if you have a blind faith. But that's already, but you could always ask me, so how come today we have several thousands, tens of thousands of young people who do not even go to the army of Israel, they go to the yeshivot, and they don't prepare themselves for making a living. So what do we do? How come? Well, for this there are several answers. Number one, if a man, if a boy is really talented and he has the mind for it, it's good if he spends his young life in Torah. And if he has a source of living, which means that's why today we have the kollel. The kollel, they pay them. It's not much, stipendia. It's not much money, but at least he can survive on it. You have this, it's worth it. I mean, you are not going to be rich, but at least you will be rich in Torah. It's worth it. Some people do take it, and there's no complaint. But some people, if they expect to become rich, then Habibi, go to learn, go to university and learn. Why not? That's okay. But if you are smart, you go to college. Beautiful. May God protect you. Why not? Just make sure you are always connected with Torah, connected with the yeshiva. Always go to yeshiva at least 1 hour. At least I have so many friends that are all day they work in the bank and everything, and in the evening they go and have a shiur of 1 hour, 2 hours of Torah. A successful Jew is a Jew who has both profession as well. I'm talking about normal Jews. That is the 95% of the Jewish community. But 5% is important that it should be dedicated totally to Torah. I don't know if you agree with me. You know, the usual, the very famous discussion in Israel regarding those who do not go to the army. Of course, if a person is using it as an excuse not to go to the army, is not good at all. But you still have a certain 5% of young, brilliant minds who, if they go only for Torah, they will become Geonim. And the Geonim are very important for the continuation of the survival of the Jewish people. The Jewish people wouldn't have survived without the great minds of the Rambam, of the Vilna Gaon, of the great of Ben Ish Chai, and so forth. And those people, believe me, they had to learn all day and all night. Should we stop here, or find a way how to conclude, or to continue? We can always remind you of what we did learn one day about Ben Azai, famous Ben Azai, who did not even get married. We find in the Talmud in Masechet Yevamot on page 63 that Ben Azai, while teaching the obligation of getting married, he himself did not get married. So while teaching the importance of getting married, he says, "Kol mi she'eno osek pirya befira v'rivya keilu shofech damim." If a person does not occupy himself with procreating, which means getting married and bringing children, is like a killer, is like a spiller of blood. And yet he himself did not get married. And his disciples, the Talmud tells us, that his disciples said, "Na'e doresh velo na'e mekayem." Rabbi, you tell us what to do when you yourself do not do it. So what was his answer that became so famous throughout the generation? That's the partner of Rabbi Akiva, that's Ben Azai. Ben Azai, our sages said, there is another statement in the Talmud in Masechet Bechorot on page 62, when we find that even Ben Azai himself, that all the sages of Israel compared to me are like a shell of garlic, except Rabbi Akiva. He calls him the bald man. Rabbi Akiva was bald. And you could be sure that Ben Azai was not just pretentious, presumptuous. Oh no, he knew what he was saying. Indeed, his great knowledge was known all over the Talmud. But he did not get married. So his disciples said, "Why didn't you get married?" He says, "Uma e'aseh shenafshi chashka b'Torah." What can I do? I have such desire to learn Torah that I have no room for other desires. If to marry, you have to have desires. I have no desires, he says. My desire is concentrated only on Torah. Now, this, by the way, is discussed in the Even HaEzer in the book of Jewish law. Should we emulate Ben Azai? Should we also say the same thing? I don't want to get married because I want to learn Torah as much as I can? Because there is such an opinion in the Talmud in Kiddushin, where it says, "Rechaim betzavaro v'yasok b'Torah." How can you get married and also learn Torah when you have a yoke on your neck? So there is such a thing, but that's not the halacha, because it's brought clearly in the book of Even HaEzer, the Jewish law, the book of the Jewish law, the great book of the Jewish law, where it says that nobody is allowed to do like Ben Azai did. Ben Azai was an exception of all the rules. He was something phenomenal. Nobody can be like Ben Azai. Nobody. I mean, in his mind, nobody can have a mind like Ben Azai. Therefore, get married. And even if you have to get married and learn Torah, only it's preferable for a Talmid Chacham, by the way, to wait a little for his marriage until maximum the age of 20 or 24. Even 24 is okay for a Talmid Chacham before he gets married. Otherwise, a person is under the obligation. If you don't learn Torah, your obligation to get married is from the age of 18. Ben Shmoneh Esrei Lachuppah, our sages said. At the age of 18 you have to get married. But if you are a Talmid Chacham, if you learn Torah, we allow you to go beyond 20 and even further. But no more than 24. So you understand? So now we see that from Ben Azai, here is why there was another exception, who said, I cannot do anything but learn Torah. And by the way, I told you a million times that there is such a thing as infatuation towards the Torah. People could become infatuated with Torah. I could see that every morning. When people study with me in the Talmud, and when they get up to go to their work, they get up with sweat of joy. They say, wow, what greatness is to learn Torah. And many times they say, I wish I didn't go to work. But we have to go to work. What can we do? That's life. And our sages said, Gedol HaMelacha, to have a profession and to work is greatly appreciated by God. And even in Pirkei Avot we find Rabban Gamliel Omer, Yafeh Talmud Torah im derech eretz. You know what brings beauty upon a person? Is when he makes a living, that's derech eretz, and he has Torah. When you have both of them on your face, you are beautiful. So have a good night, my dear friends, and learn Torah. But make a living also. We didn't finish everything that I had here in store for you. Perhaps next week in your session. Any questions?